It's time for us to move on to the wonderful world of UV mapping. The trick is, before I can assign a shader to either of these birds, I need to know not what their 3D surface looks like, but what the 2D space of the model looks like. You may recall that every object has both world space and local space coordinates, and that those local space coordinates are called UVs. The UVs are what your 3D program uses to distribute the colors across the surface of the model. So if I close my hypershade and take a look at something really simple, like my floor, I've got the modeling menus across the top, so I can go to this UV editor, and that will show me the two-dimensional grid that makes up the floor. And this makes perfect sense because the floor is essentially a cube with the bottom removed from it. See, there's no bottom down there. So this area here is the top of the cube, these are the sides of the cube, and this is exactly how the wood planes are situated. Very sensible, very logical. Same thing if I look at the cloth is essentially just a plane. Just a plane, just a plane. Nice and easy. But of course, the ducky shapes are much more complicated than the draperies here. So I wanted to take UV mapping slowly in a few stages, and the first one is just to show you what a completed UV map looks like. So I've got this ducky right here, the sitting one, is already UV mapped for you. So when I look at this, in the UV editor, what I can show you is that UVs are comprised of two things. First, they're comprised of individual UVs, which look exactly like vertices and happen at the intersection of edges. Second, they are comprised of shells, and shells are these big areas. Shells are contained within edges called border edges. Now each time I select a UV shell, you'll see that part of the model is being selected. So this UV shell here corresponds to the ducky's foot. This one here corresponds to this leg. Shells can be moved in 2D space, so I can take this and maybe scale it down and move it to give it a little bit of breathing room. This is the other leg. I'll do the same thing with that. This is the body. Scale it down a touch. And these are the feet. This last bit here is the beak. When I move these things in 3D, when I move these things in 2D, it does not affect the 3D at all. However, the selection will select the same bit of the model as the UV shell. So every component here corresponds to a component here, but it's all been flattened out. Nifty, right? I hope it's nifty. UVs can be a little confusing at first, and that's why I want you to start by working with a shell that's already been completed, like this one. One other thing I want you to notice is here in the UV editor, again, I can use Alt or Option right and middle clicks to move around. This is a grid. It's a great big grid. This point is the origin on the grid, and these directions here, this is the end of quadrant 1, this is the end of quadrant 1. This first quadrant of the grid is called the 0 to 1 space, and this is the only space in which a texture map will be applied. Outside of the 0 to 1 space, textures will be repeated, but will not be applied directly. So when I'm done with my UV map, I need to be sure that all of my shells are inside this border here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just taking this map as it stands, exporting it into Photoshop, making a texture there, and pulling it back in. This is just so that you can get a little bit of experience working with UV maps. When we're done, we'll tackle this other ducky. The UV map on this other ducky is not nearly as complete, so you'll get some experience UV mapping there before you start building your own model. The UV editor here does have a toolkit. Mine came in undocked, so I will redock it. And so that you're aware, there are some tools that will help you. Under Arrange and Layout, I can do things like take these two shells, orient them, which should attempt to orient them so that they are facing the same way. It will also allow me to stack shells, so if I can get them to orient correctly, I can also stack them. Stacked shells will have the exact same pixels that I paint applied to both shells. Sometimes that's good if you like color blocking, sometimes it's bad, but it's something that you should know about. I'll start talking about the uses for overlapping shells when I do start texture painting, which I will in the next unit. So for now, all I want you to do is familiarize yourself with going to UV, opening the UV editor, right-clicking and going into UV shell mode. Select the birdie in sitting duck group and just start moving the shells around within the 0 to 1 space. You might have to scale them a little bit, but try to give them each a little bit of breathing room around them. Whenever you're done with that, you can click this little camera icon. This is the UV snapshot button. What this will do is it will write an image file out of Maya that you can open in Photoshop. In here, I want to be aware that my image format is set to IFF. You're going to want to write out a ping. The size that mine started up with is 2048 by 2048. That's a pretty big size. If you're working on a smaller computer or an older computer, you might want to go down to 1024 by 1024. The other thing that you'll want to do is use this Browse button here. Maya always wants to put this in your Images folder, but because you'll be re-importing this back into Maya, I like to put it in Source Images. So under Source Images, I'm going to call this ducky01 out uv.png. For some reason, if you don't type in the file extension, sometimes Maya doesn't write out an image file, so make sure you are appending that extension onto your file name here, and then say Save. When yours is set up like this, go ahead and hit the Apply button. What you should see is down here in your command line, Saved File, and then it'll show you your path, Source Images, ducky01, outuv.png. And when you've got yours, come and join me in the next video in Photoshop.